I want to specifically talk about a two-dimensional array again in this video. Let's go down to main, and you can see I have a two-dimensional array called SC. It's 3 by 4, which means there's 3 students and each student will take 4 tests. But this time I'm going to have another array called low, and this array is an array of type int, and it will be, let me type that in there, it'll be 3 things big. It's going to hold the lowest score of each student. I have another array called AVG. It's an array of type double. It's going to be 3 things big, but I'm not going to worry about that one in this video. Now, we've already talked about how do you get the data, and to get the data I pass the array name without its brackets and the number of rows, 3. I pass it up to here, void get data, and this is a procedure. You can see I have an empty, or I have an array named scores with an empty bracket and 4 hard-coded in. This receives the address of SC, and I have rows here which gets the 3. So the 3 here goes into rows, and the address of SC goes into this. Scores here is really SC in main. Now, we've already went through a video about how to fill a two-dimensional array, which is exactly what's going on here. I'm filling the two-dimensional array. The one thing I want to talk about briefly is the prompting statement. Enter test C+1 for student R+1. Basically, it'll say something like enter test 1 for student 1, enter test 2 for student 1, enter test 3 for student 1, enter test 4 for student 1. And then the C starts over again and the R increases, so enter test 1 for student 2, enter test 2 for student 2, enter test 3 for student 3 or student 2, enter test 4 for student 2. And that's basically how that prompt would work. Okay, let's assume that we have our two-dimensional array filled. This is a procedure call. I'm going to pass SC, the address of the two-dimensional array, to this right here, to scores. I'm going to pass 3 to rows, and I'm going to pass the address of low, which is a one-dimensional array. I'm going to pass that to this, to lowest. And the whole purpose of find lowest, it's not a function, it's a procedure. The whole purpose is to build this array that I will refer to as lowest in the procedure. Okay, so what do I do? R is 0, R less than rows, R++, and at this point, lowest sub R is assigned score sub R 0. Basically, I'm going to give lowest sub R the very first score, in the two-dimensional array in row 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and I can I've actually made this 1. I could say 0, but I would have an unnecessary test. So I make it 1. C is 1. C is less than 4. If score sub RC is less than lowest sub R is assigned score sub RC. So basically, I go through the entire first row, and when I'm all done, lowest sub R, which will be lowest sub 0, is assigned the lowest possible score in the first row. And then what happens is R increases to 1, and 1 is less than 3, and then lowest sub 1, that's the second position in the array, in the low array, it's assigned score sub 10. It's assigned the second row first score. In other words, the first score of the second student, it's assigned that number. And then I go through the entire second row, and when I'm all done with this inner for loop, lowest sub R, which is lowest sub 1, is going to have the lowest value in the second row. And then what happens, R is incremented again to 2, and lowest sub 2 is assigned scores 2 sub 0. The first score in the third row goes into lowest sub 2. I go through the entire third row of the two-dimensional array. When I'm all done, lowest sub r is assigned, lowest sub r is going to be the lowest value. When I'm all done with this procedure right here, in essence what I have done is simply filled this array. Now what I would like to do is pretend just for a second that we had the following scores. I'm building a two-dimensional array right here. That is my two-dimensional array, and this right here, what I'm going to build is another array called low, and for right now I'm just going to make low, I'll just put 3 X's representing that I have no data yet. So if I have a two-dimensional array, here's what happens. When I first start out, this value here is put in this position. And then I go through the entire array, and ultimately 1 is the lowest value here. 1 will be placed here. And then I go back and I loop through again. The outer for loop starts again, and this 3 would be placed here. And I go through the entire second row. When I'm all done, 3 is the lowest score. And then I go to the third position in the low array and I put 3, which is this value, and I go through the entire row. When I'm all done, this 1, the lowest score, is placed here. In essence, what I'm doing is building this low array. That's the purpose of this particular procedure, is to build that array.